Jump in here.
Okay, we're
I'm
gonna
gonna officially say hello.
Okay.
Welcome and good evening. And this is our Meet the Founders of the Scavenger Hunt. And it is evolved into Scav, but we will use both terms intermittently. And I'm Patty Gibbons. I'm from Special Collections, along with Christine Colburn and Chelsea Kaufman here. We are so happy to introduce our exhibit, Scav Hunt at UChicago, Seeking Fun, Finding Tradition. It opened this week and it'll run until August 9th. And you can see it weekdays, business hours 9 to 5. And we hope you, if you don't see it tonight, you see it again during the week and come back to it. And we're really thrilled about it. And well, tonight we're here to meet our panelists here. And we have member number one, Chris Straus. And Chris Straus is from the class of '88, lived at Snell Hitchcock, and is a lifelong Hyde Parker, third generation UC faculty member, son of former dean of students, Lorna Straus, and is professor of radiology at UC Medicine. So you might see him around campus. Our second member is Cassie Hallberg, class of '90. She lived at Pierce Shorey House, and she's the
Knock it down.
She is the chief branding strategist at Cassandra Branding. Our third member is Diane Kelly, and Diane Kelly is from the class of '90 at Pierce Tufts House, and she's the senior research fellow at Amherst. And we have our fourth member, Rick Jeffries, class of '90, Pierce Thompson House, and partner at Klein, Williams, Wright, Johnson, and Oldfather.
5 dead white guys.
Our fifth and final member of the original Scav lineup, joining us remotely from New Jersey, is Nolan McCarty, class of '90, Princeton University professor of politics and public affairs, I believe. I got everybody correctly. And we welcome you here on list releasee. So I wanted to travel back to 1986. It's autumn quarter. And new class arrives on campus. Chris has been here for a while. Chris, you had an idea. Can you tell us how you got things started?
I certainly can. But I first actually wanted to say thank you to the library for putting this on. This making it a little crazy. I wanted to say that up front. It's been very exciting. It's nice to get a little sort of history recorded, and I hope it's as successful. So everybody who's listening in and later, please put a 5-star review or whatever they get. Figure it out, make them look good. All right. Back to your question. In terms of how to get started, yeah, I'll give you the 3-minute version just because I think that you want the history. Let's get it recorded. Bottom line is I was in Hitchcock, Snell, not Snell, Hitchcock, by the way. Definitely Hitchcock, Snell. But we had a house, and if anyone knows the dorm, how it's set up, it's not in floors, it's in vertical columns, at least for Hitchcock. And so we had a little bit of friendly competition as one does in dorms. And I thought as a house activity, it'd be fun to have a scavenger hunt amongst our house members. And it got shot down miserably at the house meeting. And I kept thinking, it's like, this really was a good idea. And I was over in physics. I was in Kirsten and ran into somebody who I knew in Pierce. And eventually we ended up, you can see very strong Pierce dorm influence. But it was like, is this a good idea? And the answer was yes. And so from that point forward, we said, we're going to do this not just within one house, we would be house against house or RSO or student group against student group. And then we figured maybe we'd get 7 or 8 dorms. And in that first year, we had 42 teams. It was insane. And everybody wanted to participate. So it was a lot of fun. But I can go into more detail if need be.
We will probably hit on some more of those details. I was wondering, Cassie, how did you get started and involved?
I got dumped. I fell head over heels for a guy when I first got to the University of Chicago, and I dated him for that first quarter, and then I got completely dumped. He was over in Chamberlain House, and I thought, oh boy, I better do something to like pick myself back up. And my RA knew Chris, and I think that might have been the person you'd been talking to. And she made an announcement and said, there's a guy who wants to start a scavenger hunt. And I'd done one in high school, and I was like, that sounds like fun. That sounds totally different. And so I got hooked up with Chris.
Diane, how did you get involved in the scavenger hunt?
All right, we're going down the line here. So I'm in my dorm room. I'm typing, as you do when you're a science major. And
But on a typewriter, it was 1986.
well, I had a first line Mac 512K. Ooh.
$1,000.
And I had already, so Cassie and I had met during orientation week, and we hit it off partly because we happen to both be from the Hudson Valley. So we're like, oh, we knew all the same places in the place that we grew up. And so in the course of, becoming friends, you talk about things you've done. So I'm pretty sure what I remember is that she knew that when I was in high school, I had run 2 assassin games in my for my graduating class. And so she's like, Diane knows games. But what happened was I'm working. Cassie walks in my room and says, Diane, we're going to do a scavenger hunt and you should do it too. I was like, okay, seems like a good idea. So I did.
Rick, you're probably going to predict my question. How did-
I thought this was a bad idea. But I had a crush on Cassie Hallberg. Then Cassie Scharf, who was exotic in 2 ways. She lived on the top 2 floors of the disgusting Pierce Tower. And she was from the Eastern time zone, which made her very exotic to me. And the exhibit suggests that she came to me in the Pierce dining hall. And I don't know if you've seen the pictures, but Pierce deserved to be demolished, people. It should have been demolished while we were there. The exhibit says she came and said, would you come do this? However, the word got to me that Cassie was doing something and I could do it too. That was essentially my decision rule. So I was like, you could sit with Cassie for an hour on Monday nights and work on the list. I'm like, that sounds good to me.
No idea.
38 years later, she finds out. Missed it by that much.
Nolan, how did you
Right.
get involved in the scavenger hunt?
Sure. So Rick and I were roommates. So I can confirm almost everything Rick said. In fact, I think Cassie was literally the first person that Rick and I met on campus on the first day at the introductory reception. So I can confirm his story. My story is that I was the last one to join. I'd had a really miserable first quarter. It was really a tough transition for me. I didn't do anything but study and sleep. And then at the end of the first quarter, I said, I need to do something else. And so Rick was heading out at like 9 o'clock or something. I said, where are you going? And he told me, I said, great, I'm going to come too. And that's basically how it happened. But I will note one thing about Rick's comment about Pierce Tower and deserving to be destroyed. Actually, when it was destroyed, the wrecking ball went through our room. You can actually watch it on videotape. And if you see the wrecking ball, that's exactly our room that it went through first.
Diane was arguing that it was her room, which is
No, no,
clearly
no, no,
false
no.
because it was the
That
7th
is-
floor.
That's completely wrong. It was our room. It was
If only we were in a library surrounded by archivists, we could find out. Settle this.
We'll have to settle that later. But
No, but you put somebody on that now.
they're on it. They're on it. They're on it. So today, the judges keep things kind of close to the vest as far as their workings and how they get a list made. Tell us about how the first list came about. What were your planning meetings like and how formal were they?
We sat in the Reynolds Club and we tried to make each other laugh. And we were out in the open because no one knew what we were doing. At least for the first couple of years, no one knew, and probably very few people cared. But then we eventually had to go underground.
It was an interesting process, and it was much more sequential. It was very informal from the standpoint that you were saying it was a formal no. There was no real hierarchy so much as it was, again, trying to make people laugh, but it was also very early on, everyone sort of brought in ideas. And so the first part of this over summer and fall, you just jot things down on pieces of paper and we'd bring them all together when we were sort of like, we'll try this, we'll try that, and sort of worked way through, and things would morph on site. So you'd sit there and say, oh, that's sort of funny, but we can make it better. And that's sort of how it got put on the list. And once it gets on the list, we'd go through an editing process. By winter and early spring, it was really going through. It's like, okay, we got too many things like this, but you balance things out and things get pushed to the next year or the like. But it was a process that was organic and evolved, I should say, as the process went on, as the event got bigger too.
If anybody's ever seen 30 Rock, it's like the writer's room scenes in 30 Rock.
In a good way.
Like you said, people making people laugh, pitching stupid ideas and having cynical people, shoot them down and then, trying to make them better. So that's a good visual, is the writer's room in 30 Rock.
In the early lists, you can see items in sequence where you can see we're riffing with each other, right? It's and it's the dean, bound and gagged, someone bound and gagged, and a naked bound and gagged dean, right? Where we're like all seeing and raising each other, going around the table, in what was then the C shop. I guess it still is the C shop, but that's its secondary handle. But I mean, there was a bit of. It wasn't one-upsmanship because I think we were having a good time. At least, at least I hope I wasn't the one guy in the room.
No.
But it was there. You could see sort of in real time us putting the list together and riffing off of each other's ideas.
Well, it was also important to make sure that the list had balance. So we went through and as it evolved and and even that first year, we would ask ourselves, what is this going to look like? What's the pile of stuff? What do they have in front of them in terms of the items versus things that were active versus questions, et cetera. So it was always a balancing act of making sure that everyone was involved. How can we get more items that would get the nerds that lived in the library doing something versus those who wanted to get out around Chicago and get an item that was off campus or the like. So it was really about trying to also develop items that prompted involvement, but by the biggest diverse group possible from the get-go.
The list has a lot of kind of clumps of categories, and they seem to have kind of percolated early on. Did that happen organically, or did you specifically say we're going to make trivia and stupid human tricks and things like that? How did those categories come about, and what were those categories?
I just remember the first time I met Chris and he said to me, did you ever think about like who made the match? Who made the first match? And in those days, there was no internet. So it wasn't like I could go to ChatGPT and just say like, who made the first match? And it was like, yeah. And so, I think that was kind of like how we sort of started with the trivia, and then the stupid human tricks came, and, it just kind of began to organically kind of percolate the road that we really set out for road trips.
The road trip was an accident. The first year we were like, well, all right. So you may notice that my sobriquet is the perverse. Thank you, Rick. The first year, I don't remember which one of us came up with the idea of a soda can with a 5-cent deposit. But I remember advocating for it because it was hilarious, because it would make people, because it would be hard to get. And we didn't think that anyone was going to go get it. You have to travel to another state in order to get it. Who would do that? That's just crazy.
It's almost final.
It's almost finals. Why would anyone do that? Well, turns out a lot of people did that. Not only did a lot of people do that, some people, there was one team that drove to Iowa. Several teams drove to Iowa. One team like memorizing the lyrics to American Pie all the way so they could do a dramatic reading of it. And then there was another team where the team member flew standby to New York, got out, threw a bunch of quarters into a soda machine in order to get several 5-cent deposits, flew standby back to Chicago, And after that, we're like, okay, people are committed to go places, so we should lean into that.
And no, that's definitely how the category got started, but what they don't realize is I discovered Mr. G's was where the Hyde Park Produce is now. It was a grocery store, and they had a missed delivery of soda cans that had 5-cent deposits on it. And I had noticed this
Could have got about 50,
and
30.
put it on sort of at the last minute. It was in the last couple of weeks. And I said, who's going to notice? And they didn't. They all drove to Iowa.
But my favorite early category was Harass Mike Royko, who was a famous columnist for the Sun Times and the Tribune. And the possibly apocryphal story is he started changing his timing of his vacation each year so that he would be out of town during Scavenger Hunt, because we invariably sent people after him.
Nolan, I can confirm. Bottom line is I called Mike Royko up the first year to say, would you be willing to sign the front page of the Tribune? He's a very famous newspaperman, columnist in his day.
And he hated us.
And
he
well, he
hated
didn't at the
University of
time. He
Chicago.
didn't at the time. He learned to hate us.
To us.
I called and he said, sure, kid, I'll do that. At which point he only did it for one team. He actually did it for the Shorey House team, which is they got the one paper signed by him, and he refused to do anyone else. At which point everybody in the Tribune Tower was really trying to help him sign more papers, and this is good publicity. And he spent the whole weekend evading medical or UFC students.
Of
At
course,
which
this means war.
At which point, year over year for the next several years, we had Mike Royko items, all legally achievable. But he then by year 3, he was calling me. He would call me and say, "Where's that damn hunt?" And he was like, I'm out of town. So I can confirm he did avoid us.
The exhibit suggests that you and we hounded him to his grave. And given the columns that he wrote about the University of Chicago, I'm not sorry.
That should be in the exhibit, actually. Somebody.
I think that was the first running joke, and it ran until his grave. So it ran a long time, and it kickstarted a good tradition of running jokes, which Scav today is littered with. So I have a lightning round question for everybody. What makes a good list item? And do you have any favorites?
Let's start with Nolan.
I was sort of partial to the year we asked for a Nobel Prize. You know, I thought it was a good item because it's something that, you know, the university is known for. It's something that's not easily gettable, but it was gettable. There was a variety of ways in which it was achieved. I believe Leon Lederman, the physics Nobel Prize winner, actually showed up with his Nobel Prize and, you know, showed it off to everyone. Gary Becker actually sent one of his in typical economist fashion, sent one of his graduate students to show it off. But I thought that was a kind of quintessential Scav Hunt item.
Okay, I have 2 messages for the University of Chicago administration. I've learned tonight from the current Scav judges that every item has to be examined by the university administration, and that is oppression. Rise up, Scabbies. Item 1A is, if anybody from admissions is listening, Claire Jane Jeffries will be applying next year. But I think I am hideously disappointed to learn that the category that was pioneered by Cassie and Diane, which was the gratuitous nudity category, has been sharply curtailed as a result of the above oppression. You know, and so you'll see in the early lists, you know, a person dressed only in balloons and string, and there were people on campus that you wanted to show up wearing only balloons and string. It was never those people. Those items always backfired on us, and Cassie will confirm that. But I always liked the performative nudity ones, and then we did not get the blimp. This is how old we are. I mean, we are among the artifacts we've created, but it used to be that blimps flew over sports stadiums and could display messages, and we thought somebody's got a connection to Goodyear and would fly the Goodyear blimp over campus and, you know, put, Tufts House over on the display. It never happened, and I was disappointed. That was a 500-point item. No points.
All right, remind me of the question?
What makes a good list item and any favorites?
Okay, although yes, gratuitous nudity, always a favorite. But the kinds of things that I always really enjoyed were things that were either very difficult to get or things that you had to make. So one of my favorites, you got to make it, was during our years was spelling out the preamble to the Constitution in alphabets.
Yes.
It was a fantastic item because as it turns out, a box of alphabets does not have all the letters that you need. It does not have the letters of the alphabet in the same proportions that the English language uses it. It's just a bunch of A's and, it's mostly vowels. So you would walk by while the year that item was on the list, you'd walk by lounges and you'd see people in a little group on the floor with glue and
$120.
A bunch of boxes of alphabets, creatively breaking the little bits to try to build letters that they needed. So that's making stuff. We're all creative. It's great. Hard to get things. There was, I will admit that I was the person who suggested the telephone pole. The reason I suggested it is that my father's an electrician and he worked in the yard and he worked for the power company, and there was so I knew from growing up that a power yard is full of used telephone poles that no one cares about anymore. They've taken them down, the creosote, they're not using them. You could just go ask, and most teams went and asked and got their pole that way. But there was the small group of people who decided that the pole that they were about to put up on 55th Street was the ideal, was their ideal material.
Don't leave it there.
So after 3 teams tried to steal it, and the police made them put it back every time, that telephone pole wound up with its own City of Chicago police escort for the remainder of the weekend. And that is what the scavenger hunt is all about.
Well, it's hard to go after that. So I'm going to go back to gratuitous nudity for a moment. The university should rethink the policy, and mostly because there's actually a human being sitting in the audience tonight that would not physically exist on this planet if it hadn't been for gratuitous nudity. So, I think probably the crazy story is that my first year of the hunt, we had a naked person, and we also had a pair of red silk bikini underwear, extra points if modeled. And Diane nicely tipped off her house Tufts that I was going to be their judge, and they thought it'd be fun to embarrass me. So when we got to the naked person, normally some really person that, you really wish they hadn't dropped their raincoat, they strapped their raincoat, and you just kind of move on. But lo and behold, she yells, or I yell, naked person. And next thing I know, I hear hit it. And Tufts House is now blasting this song, You Can Leave Your Top Hat On. And these 2 guys start dancing around me. And they're taking off layer after layer. And the dean of the college is going, take it off. The whole room is stopped, and there's 2,500 people in the room, and they're all looking at me. And I went to Catholic high school, and I am 18 and away from home. And these 2 guys are dancing around me naked. And finally, this one guy gets completely naked. The other guy has his red silk bikini underwear. So I got my eyes trained on the guy with the red silk bikini underwear. And the guy who's got completely naked grabs me, dips me, gives me a kiss, and everyone's cheering. Thank God there was no cell phones in those days. There was no social media. The the reporters that were there were print reporters, so they didn't have cameras, thank goodness. And as it turned out, the guy who dipped me and gave me a kiss was the best man at my wedding. And the guy with the red silk bikini underwear is my husband, Bob. And that was our daughter, Athena, who's also an alumni of University of Chicago twice over. So, you know, administration, rethink this, because like you got I paid for 2 degrees, additional degrees for my kid based off of the fact that they allowed nudity. Now, like, what are they thinking?
It is hard to go last. You said great. What makes it item great?
Yeah,
I think the creativity is certainly a big piece of it. I think it's also the items that were so ordinary, but you just don't have around. I mean, I remember, you know, a fully done Christmas tree in May. Where are you going to find one? You had to sort of create it and hunt it down or the like. But so there are a lot of items that are very ordinary, but not easy. So the gravestone, I remember that was that first year, and the TV crew was coming by, and I quickly covered that one up. That one was never seen on television, but it was unused, by the way. I mean, we returned it. It was returned. But you force people to do things they wouldn't normally do. But I think ultimately, in the end, what I like is when people get out of their comfort zone. So I'm like off the top of my head, like one road trip. I mean, when we went up to one year, it was a stone off of the state capital of Minnesota. They're just white rocks. I mean, it was like 5 points. But the guards at the Capitol had their pockets full of rocks for everyone driving by to give them the rocks. You know, there were 50 teams coming through trying to get a rock. I like things that got people involved, not just the students or the participants, but then everyone else. So it's their parents, their families, other small towns. I remember one woman when we had we were just talking about the big thing grows in a desert.
Oh, the
tumbleweed.
Tumbleweed. It's like, and how much you got points for the size? Like, oh, my mom lives. We got in the backyard. She went, got a big tumbleweed, went to the airport, and I think it was Albuquerque, and stood by all the flights going to Chicago until somebody volunteered to take it on the flight. And her son met him at the airport and said, thanks, and ran off. It's just
Take this
goofiness.
tumbleweed to Chicago.
It was like a yard wide. It was huge. And it was Southwest has got a sense of humor. But it was things that got people involved, but also got the university a little bit of positive attention. I really wanted to phrase how important it was for us to make sure that we weren't being destructive, we're being constructive, and really saying we weren't the boring place. This was a great place to go to school. We had a lot of fun, and we finally got national news attention for several years. We were on Channel 2 News and NBC News.
Well, after the naked striptease, that the following year, the media started sending
Started showing up,
cameras.
yeah.
A lot of cameras then.
But you show up with an elephant or something like that, they would start paying attention. It was the University of Chicago wasn't just boring, and we had a tradition that was unique to us. But if one item probably was the nuclear reactor. I mean, that was, I mean, that's actually been repeated. We had a policy that was no repeat items, and I think that one has shown up twice. But it was fun. We ran around with Geiger counters and proved it worked. We had several that year.
I see. Get Nolan back in.
Yeah,
Oh,
I don't know.
I'm back, Nolan.
I think we'll see if he pops back in.
There he is.
There.
Yay.
Welcome back, Nolan.
He says I wasn't gone.
Nowadays, people know about Scavenger Hunt and Scav and its group and its reputation, but the first year, no one knew what you guys were doing. How did you promote it, and what was that first recruitment like, or the first announcement of Scav?
Bribery.
Well, we had and again, the first several years, I mean, at least as long as I was involved. So it was free to participate. I mean, from our perspective, and everybody got a prize. So if you showed up and even came with one item, you got a 5-gallon tub of ice cream. Every team got a 5-gallon tub of ice cream from the C Shop. We made sure that was budgeted in. And that I think was important to help promote, at least we thought initially, and then of course it went crazy. We had a lot of tubs of ice cream, but it worked. I think in that sense, I don't know, others
I think the ice cream was huge. I mean, the food wasn't that good. I mean, you needed that ice cream.
Like I said, bribery. It's like, here you want, you play the game, you get ice cream. And there are also prizes. I mean, I know that it has changed more to glory, and glory is great, but the first few years there were significant cash prizes. Though, as I understand it, basically winning it costs the amount of money that you would win.
Much more.
Or more. So it really was just it was more like a balance. It was more like a way to balance your budget more than anything else.
I also think that because you did have to build things, it drew you in. So even if you were, like, I'm way too busy this quarter, I've got finals, I got this, you'd walk into your house common room and you would see people with boxes of alphabets building the preamble, the Constitution, and you just automatically got sucked in. And so it just kind of built because so many people got sucked in so many different ways.
There, Cassie and Diane reminded me earlier this afternoon that that in 1987, or it's the winter of 86, 87, what had been a fairly vibrant but controversial campus tradition called the lascivious costume ball. You're going to kind of pick up where the olds are in terms of we want the sack, people. There was a thing called the lascivious costume ball that fell apart early in our time, and there was a Playboy magazine article that ranked us 300 out of 300 schools for fun, and that to Chris's point, we had sort of this weighed down reputation that I think Mike Royko contributed to, that we were exactly the people that we thought we were, and so I always had this fear that we were going to throw ourselves a birthday party and no one would come, right? And that's just sort of that root thing of me standing at the grade school couple skate and me not having anybody to skate with. That's burned into my memory. So the idea of us giving, if you even do this, yeah, right. There's a lot about my psychology. The idea that we had to give people a tub of ice cream to get them interested, but as heroin dealer tactics go, it was unbelievably successful.
Yes, it's true. They needed the ice cream as bribery the first year. They did not need it the second year.
And even then, it was the first. We had about 12 teams that first signed up. We did not think it was going to be half as big as it was, and there ended up 25 additional teams signed up later over the weekend. They just like, oh my God, they're having so much fun. They all started doing it. So it really sort of was a see one, do one. Like, oh, I'm going to get involved. But it was not initially thought to be as big as it ended up becoming, which became the largest campus event overnight.
This also meant that the first year we were completely unprepared and we had no idea what we were doing. None.
Let's talk about the Judgment Day, the first one. How did that unfold and what did it look like? Who showed up? How many people? Where did you go?
They had us in Ida Noise, but they had us on the third floor of Ida Noise. So just that one, the one room with the freeze, that was it. That was where everyone was packed.
12 teams.
Except that more than 12 teams showed up.
We had we had the first and the third floor.
No, not yet. No, I'm pretty sure it was just.
No, I think she's
floor.
right. I think that first year we were just on that. Yeah.
So the gravestone was the second year, not the first year?
Yes,
Probably.
Yeah, this
Okay.
is what
I remember
happens.
the conflict.
When you guys are 38 years from now, this is going to be like, no!
It all just kind of swooshes together in the brain after a while.
Yeah. But no, that first one, the judging was a nightmare because we made the mistake of trying to have one judge per team, or but you had a couple teams, but you weren't doing it by page yet. And so you were really slow and you also were uneven in how you were judging, because how I judged something was different, how Nolan judged it, how Diane judged it. And people weren't thrilled about that. And then we also didn't have a computer. We had a pen and paper and a calculator. And so we couldn't score it. And so it took hours and people were really mad at us because we couldn't say who the winner was. And the following year, we went to this really cool innovation. It was called a personal computer and
And a spreadsheet.
and a spreadsheet, yeah. And we actually started using personal computers, and we had one computer person that second year. And then the third year, we put an all hands on deck call for Apples and PCs and anything that was kind of portable. Cause yeah, that one year, the first one portable computer was a Cray or something like that. And it was it was big.
The second year, we also switched from every individual grade, every individual doing an entire team to every individual judge doing a page. And so the page, it increased consistency because you're doing the same items over and over again. And you would just like take your page. You didn't have to also do it in order. You would like sort of you have your page, you'd run to the a team that you saw didn't have a judge, you'd yell for your page, you'd get, they'd pull it out and then they'd show your stuff. So it sped things up a lot. And I believe that's how is that how we are still doing it today? Yes.
So it's like, Field of Dreams. I mean, we show up, we show up on Mother's Day and there's 2,500 people at Ida Noise, right? We had utterly failed to plan for anything within an order of magnitude of that, right? We just had no idea that was coming. And we had discovered the weird in you to a degree that really surprised us. And one thing that I think I was not prepared for, at least, was how clever you were in responding to the list items. So I think we had Mike Royko per se, on the list by the second year. We bring Mike Royko to Ida Noise.
It's a nice black guy from the South Side.
Right.
There's several Mike Roykos.
So some guy that had a Polish grandmother, but did not appear to be mostly Polish, shows up, and he's and it's Mike Royko from Greencastle, Indiana. We were like, so we're gonna have to do partial points, right? We're gonna have that's not what we
get full
meant.
credit. I think we get full credit for that.
I think we got.
Should we give full credit to the guy from?
I mean, in my judging, if they outwitted us, that was their victory.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with Nola. It's like the year that we asked for a pair of socks signed by Mike Royko of the Chicago Tribune, because by this point we're trying to get wise to all the one guy shows up with the paperwork for changing his name to Mike Royko of the Chicago Tribune.
Yep.
And he signed his socks. I'm like, okay, you get that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that was wonderful about going to school here is I was never, and Nolan can attest to this, I certainly was not the hardest working guy at the table, but I was never the smartest guy at the lunch table, right? There was always someone who could outflank just about every item that we put on the list, right? There was always, somebody had a twist, a thought, a pun,
But that was anticipated and desired. So we would purposely put things that were completely ambiguous because we wanted to see what you came up with.
Yeah.
No.
They often were low point items. So you have to understand the point system also help sort of stratify. So if it's a 500-point item, it's got to be really strict and harsh, and it better be that LCAR, right? It's got to be something real. But things that are 5 points, yeah, be creative.
I think half our items were double entendre for the.
That was a good one.
Yeah.
An enigma. I remember that was like 2 points.
Yeah.
But I think, and I hope I'm not, from what I have seen of the list construction process, I think that holds with you guys, right? There are items that are built to attract creative interpretation, right? And and bring out the best of the really
And
messed up weird
weirdness.
thing in us. That ties 40 years of us together.
Well, Scav has evolved over the years, but what feels the same to you? What in the spirit of things today? Can you pinpoint and kind of pull back to the early days?
Diane, why don't you try that first?
I think people's willingness to really go that extra mile to build something build something cool, find something weird, learn a skill very, very quickly and be willing to be bad at it in front of your judge. I think that has maintained itself.
Yeah. I crossed over from scabby to parent at a certain point in time. And I would love to go to my daughter's dorm room and apartment, and I would see the weirdest crap. And I'd be like, what is she doing? And, invariably the answer was, oh, I built that for Scavenger Hunt, and that was just really cool. That sense of creativity, which was, ties back to that very first Scavenger Hunt when they were building that preamble of the Constitution and having to figure out how to cut alphabets to make more letters and stuff like that. That was all really fun.
I like the community element. I mean, it really is something that helps, as you said, binds people together at the time. But over the years, we still talk about it. We still find there's I guess pride may be one positive thinking about it. I think in general, if there's something that's still present, it's the unifying components of being participant in a group effort that sort of is nowhere else. I mean, you're not going to find this on another campus. It sets us apart or different in a way we can all be very proud of.
Rick or Nolan?
Nolan, you go.
Yeah, I guess I would say, and this has been echoed earlier, just the willingness of students to not take themselves too seriously and to do things that are, again, outside their comfort zone, that they're not particularly good at, to do things that they recognize that are going to look a little bit silly. I hate to say this, I love my students at Princeton, but I don't think you'll find Princeton students doing things outside their comfort zone that will intentionally make them look silly. That's just not their culture. But I think Scavenger Hunt really does encapsulate that, important aspect of the University of Chicago culture.
I was a misfit my whole childhood, right? I mean, there is no place that I fully fit in, and I was able to make some friends and and kind of make my way socially, and but I just had a sense that nobody thought like I did, thought about things in the way that I did, had the same sort of ideas and feelings that I did about, and wasn't as interested in the things that I was interested in. And I came here, I mean, I didn't, I was kind of discouraged about applying to college, and I came here and fell in love with it. And that's because I read an article in the Chicago Tribune about an argument that happened among faculty about the meaning of the phrase "hoist on his own petard." If they can have a screaming match about about that, I want to go check that out. Whatever that is in you that brought you here is the thing that made 2,500 people show up that first Mother's Day in 1987. And it's I got off the metro today and walked down 57th Street, and there is still. Yeah, and I was screaming at some of these guys. I mean, this building still makes my blood run cold, right? There's orange carpet in here that is the color of despair, right? That was that was on every floor. I think 4 and 5 were blue or green, but 2 and 3 were orange, and that is the color of my soul during 9th week of winter quarter when the wind is blowing off the lake and I have 17,000 lines of Latin to translate before my final, right? That's, there's things here, but as I'm walking down 57th Street, towards the reg today, there's something in me that comes back alive, right? And there's something in me that, that just is never home unless it is here. And the thing that I see in the list as it's being built, the thing that I see in the artifacts, among whom I now unfortunately number, that, whatever that is alive in me when I am at 57th and University is alive in this event. And I am so proud of what you guys have done to keep it alive. And I'm so grateful that that nobody's died. And I'm mad about the nudity thing, but for the most part, I'm just absolutely madly in love with the fact that we're here getting to talk about something that happened 40 years ago that you guys are still having fun with.
That segues, yeah, 37. But that segues into one last question for me, and then I'll turn it over to everybody else. Obviously, this is what you started, maybe on a lark, has lasted 37 years, has spread around the globe. It's been mentioned on TV shows in England, and you name it. The press is endless. Guinness records, all kinds of pop culture references. I mean, how does that feel when you hear about this throughout the years? Like, wow, that's still going. And
I'm still waiting for Hollywood to call. And by the way, anyone knows anyone, I still think it'd be a really good buddy movie. I think it'd be fun. How does it make you feel? It's just fun. I mean, it's definitely, it's inspiring to think that we're able to have, again, make the place a little better. I mean, a little bit different. And I think that will always be something I will take away from me as important. Probably leave the place better than I found it. So.
I love how it's evolved, because what we did was cool, but how it's evolved is even cooler. Like, I am so excited to see the list released tonight, and I'm desperately going to try to stay up because at my age that's hard. And the Olympics, right? Like, we never even fathomed any of this stuff. So there's so many really cool things that it grew and evolved and became bigger, and that's just really, really, really neat.
I'm going to second that for Cassie. It's like the fact that it is not static is, I think, an ideal aspect of it. Is each generation of judges take what has come before and tweak it and evolve it and change it to match current conditions and come up with new stuff that's, that people love and make the whole thing more exciting and better. And it is fun to watch in a very similar way that it's fun to watch a baby grow up into an adult. My daughter, class of 2018, sometimes refers to Scav as mom's first baby. And because in a way it is, it's like a thing I helped start, and a thing I did for the 4 years I was in college, and then kind of kept an eye on after, and because I loved it so much.
And she also got a husband out of it.
Yeah.
There have been many human beings created by the Scavenger Hunt.
Anyway, yes. So it's been a great part of my life. I have loved to watch it grow and evolve. And now that it's old enough to have kids of its own, we'll see what it keeps doing.
It is scientifically, mathematically impossible to be more maroon than Chris Straus, right? The child of faculty, born, in the lying-in hospital, went to the lab school, went to undergraduate school, went to med school, is on the med school faculty now. I mean, there's nobody more, he spells his name with the Old English C, right? I mean, there's nobody more that guy. I mean, John D. Rockefeller wasn't more University of Chicago than. And so when he he gets shot down by admittedly the stiffs who lived in Hitchcock at the time. But he goes to somebody else and kind of hits the pitchfork and says, "What do you think about doing a scavenger hunt?" That note immediately resonated. I take absolutely no credit for the idea. I take very modest credit for the execution. But that note is still humming today, right? And it's still resonating through, now, our children have lived through Scavenger Hunt and graduated, right? And so it's to just have heard that note at the beginning and to hear it still humming as I walk down 57th Street. That's just a privilege. I'm just a lucky guy to have been a part of something that keeps on humming. And I'm so grateful to you guys for keeping it alive in the vibrant, nutty, nerdy, screwed up way that you got it going. I couldn't be prouder of you.
Yeah, I'll echo everything that everyone else has said about the immense pride and sort of participating in the beginning of something that's lasted such a long time. One thing I'll note that's interesting is that, if I ever need to break the ice and, at some gathering or something, the easiest way to do that is say, hey, I was one of the kind of founding members of the University of Chicago Scavenger Hunt. And everybody, regardless of where they went to the University of Chicago, how old they are, whatever, recognizes that and are like, no way, that's impossible. You didn't do it. And I said, yes, I did. I said, and I can say, look on Wikipedia, because it actually was responsible for my first Wikipedia entry. So, it's I think it's important to recognize, and one of the things that makes me the most proud is not just that it's a University of Chicago tradition that's lasted, almost 40 years. It has, as Patty mentioned, this kind of worldwide recognition. I can, go anywhere. I tweeted today about the online exhibit, mostly having people respond, making fun of my high school picture. But it was amazing the cross section of people who reacted to the tweet, because they all know, whether they went to Chicago or went elsewhere, how special the University of Chicago Scavenger Hunt is, and that's really important.
Well, thank you very much. And I know we have some questions in the audience. I think Christine has a microphone she can pass around.
We're going to repeat the question so Nolan
Can hear it.
can
Yeah.
make sure we.
I can
Okay.
hear everything. I just can't see anything. So
Okay,
Okay.
as long as you don't point at me, we're fine. We're fine.
starting now.
Yeah.
First, I just want to say thank you guys so much. The thing that you invented was easily the most memorable part of my college experience. This is now the 14th scavenger hunt I'm participating in to some extent. So thank you guys so much. My question is just, are there any specific items you've seen from the years after you participated that have surprised or delighted you?
All right, so the question is whether we have seen items post our graduation that have delighted or surprised us. And the year that that teams made Patronuses out of garbage bags and just sort of blew them up in air, and up they went, and they were dolphins, and I was stunned. I loved that. I loved that item.
I only found out about it tonight, but I really, really love the bridge across the Midway. I thought that was really a clever one.
I was moved when I learned that you kept the torch burning during COVID. And instead of the blood drive, which I think was our.
So we,
Starting
year one.
year
No,
two.
no,
Year two. It's not on the first one.
It's time for our applesauce.
They do all blur together. We have raised more blood than any organization.
But we turned all you turned all the processor cycles into unfolding the proteins of the virus, and found a way, this is the geek capital of the planet. It's the geek capital of the universe, and to say we're going to keep this thing alive even if we can't be together as much as we could be, that was an incredibly proud moment. And for pulling that off, and a moment of light in a really dark moment. God bless you.
Nolan?
Yeah, I mean, it's cliche, but I mean, I think the nuclear reactor really stands out. Just because of the magnitude of the achievement, and it really is. If there's anything, and the thing, as I said earlier, the thing I really like about, an item for the Scav Hunt is its connection to the history of the University of Chicago. And actually having a nuclear reactor at the site of the first chain nuclear reaction is, it has a nice poetry to it.
So on brand.
So
Yeah.
on brand, so on brand.
This question is for Chris. I don't know, but this was a really long time ago, but my boss, Carrie Gullis, actually interviewed you a very long time ago about the origins of Scav, and I'm here to ask you the same question again. So, is it true that your mom was the actual creator of Scav and you just stole the idea?
I don't ever remember being asked that. No. I am pretty confident in that one. I will give her full credit. She was the one who suggested that we have one judge per page. So when we sort of, this thing blew up, was scale, we were like running around going like, oh my God, there's so many people. And there are other stories of that night I was being called to atone for that first year. And they know what it was. But yeah, that's when I said, look, it was just so slow and we had this issue. And she said, no, you should have one judge per page. So she was involved, but not the idea.
Hi. First of all, thank you so much for the panel. My name is Leela. I applied to UChicago because of Scav. I ended up going here because of Scav too, because I heard it about a junior year of high school. But nevertheless, I was wondering about, so kind of a question about the future of Scav as well. I don't think it's a secret that UChicago has become more pre-professional in the past years. A lot of kids go here to do like banking and like other things that are mostly career oriented and don't come here because of the life of the mine as much. So in your opinion, as people who created the Hunt, do you think that the Hunt should lean into that demographic and kind of just reflect whatever like the student body is, or just stick to the roots and continue doing what it's been doing in the past? So kind of evolution question, I guess.
It's not up to us. It's up to you guys to decide what it's going to be.
Well, I was just wondering about your opinion, like in your personal outlook,
I-
really.
I have
Sounds like
super
a
strong
background.
I have super strong
You-
opinions
You
about
take
this.
her opinion seriously?
I would listen.
Yeah.
I'm going to
Listen-
jump on that. I will support that in the sense that Diane's 100% right. It's obviously not our say, but in terms of something I said earlier, I think it's really important to make sure that whatever the event is that it doesn't become too narrow, right? It is about the breadth. And so it's not that you don't want to exclude others. You want to have everybody somehow find their place or have a reason to participate. We really approached it early on about, okay, here's a dorm. You got 100 or 200 very different types of personalities. How can we get them all to participate in some capacity? So that takes the list has to reflect that.
I also think if you look at this group of people, right? Two went into academia and two went into professional.
Three academia.
Three academia, right? Two into professional. So Rick's a lawyer. I'm an MBA. And, you're going to find that even your professional students, they're going to have a great time with this. And, one of the crazy ones, I was lucky enough to be part of a team that took a company for an initial public offering, an IPO. And I just like Nolan had a kind of one day in one of those team building corporate things, said my Wikipedia page entry has me founding the Scavenger Hunt. And people were like, oh, that's really cool. And when you do an initial public offering, your CEO and your CFO, about 2 weeks prior to the public offering, has to go on a roadshow. And that means they have to go city to city and they have to get the investors excited and ready to actually get that IPO going. And my CEO came back from Chicago and said, I was with the investors, and when I mentioned my vice president of marketing was a founder of the Scavenger Hunt, they didn't want to talk about the company anymore, but they all agreed to invest. So it works for both your professional and your non-professional students.
Nolan, you've been looking to get in.
Yeah, so as someone who teaches in a liberal arts university, I have very strong feelings about this. There's no trade-off between the life of the mind and preparing oneself for a future career. And, you know, to highlight what Cassie just said, I don't think you see any trade-off here. So I accept what Chris said about not wanting to exclude anyone based on their interests, but I do think it's really important for things at undergraduate institutions to really stress the importance of the life of the mind, the breath, intellectual engagement. Understand that people live for a very long time, and there's plenty of times to pursue the professional goals later. And so, I would always like to see the Scavenger Hunt really lean into the kind of the intellectual, the nerdy, the geeky, and so forth, because in many ways it's the last time that you all will get a chance to be fully engaged in that, and it would be a shame to cut that short in a kind of a short-sighted way.
I feel very similarly to Nolan. And I knew when I got here that I was going to law school, right? And I was I'm the son of a lawyer. I was kind of genetically selected for this, but this place, I mean, yeah, and we're not going to do. I mean, I'm going to do a little bit of the, this. You didn't have to camp out for classes, and so and the core is soft compared to what when we had to, take physics by assembling individual atoms, and you're always going to get that sort of generational deal. But this is still better than every other undergraduate institution on the planet, right? This is still a place where your mind will be forced broader, wider open than every place else. And yes, there are people, in the frat houses on University Avenue that are just marking their time until they get their internship on Wall Street, right? I get it, but they're going to compete in Scav too. And I think what I have seen of the list process and the list items shows that there's no risk of this becoming go get us, a Lehman Brothers prospectus, right? Go get us the following 5 forms of currency. And a much larger, go get us bearer bonds, right? I don't think there's a lot of risk that this is going to become a trade school. And just looking at what is here, what is in the exhibit, what's in, I'm reasonably well informed is going to be in the list tonight. There's no danger of you losing your soul as long as the ethic is we're going to force a whole bunch of semi-willing undergraduates and some graduate students and their significant others to do a bunch of ridiculous things because we know so much and they know so much more. I think not only must you not allow that to happen, I think you're the principal sort of bulwark against the prepification of the University of Chicago.
Thank you.
I would disagree with Rick a little bit. I think a bearer bond would be a great list item.
Christine's rounding the corner for a question.
If you recall, during your time of judging the hunt, what were your greatest philosophical, strifes?
I always struggled with sort of the morality of, and I was asking these guys about it this afternoon, like, did we have any conscience about how much we were depriving people of sleep and how far we are? and how much we were asking them to drive, and apparently we did not.
No, we did not.
I mean, we at one point we had a buoy from the marina on Lake Michigan, which we thought, somebody's going to know somebody who's the harbor master, and the one's going to be in a shed. We had 8, right?
So one of them was wet. They got it that
We
morning.
got it out of Lake Michigan,
Free.
35-degree water, and so there, I think, and since we were not subject to the university's oppression, at least not much, I think looking back, at least we should have struggled if we did not. And I think we struggled a little bit with the idea of, is this dangerous? Is this a good idea?
As I recall, the reason that we asked for an Indiana Bell telephone cover.
Manhole cover.
Manhole cover.
Indiana
Gary-
Bell
Gary,
in Indiana. We asked for an Indiana manhole cover because we did not want them to steal them
Chicago.
in Chicago.
So we'd make them carry it across state lines and make it a federal crime.
I always viewed myself as the one saying, hey, guys, are you sure we should do this? And I was routinely ignored. And so it assuaged their conscience that at least the issue was raised and they could ignore it.
Yeah, this is good.
All right, there's time for the manhole cover story,
Okay.
because there's a follow-up, which I don't think you guys know yet.
Oh, I know.
There's definitely important. Long story short, as a doctor, I'm doing procedures, and I will skip through it, but I was having this one patient who couldn't get a lot of anesthetic, and I was just keeping him talking just to keep him relaxed through this procedure. And at one point he found out, he's an ex-Gary, Indiana cop. And as, a case you've always, had trouble solving or something. I was making stuff up as I'm sewing. And he said, yeah, there was one case. There's this one weekend where all of a sudden 14 manhole covers disappeared. And we couldn't figure out, and then it just stopped. And I literally got, oh no. And I'm counting my head to like how many years has it been?
What's the statute of
What's the statute of limitations? I never told him. I said, really, that's fascinating. And I went back to my work, and I should have told him. But it was the case that always baffled him. And they were gorgeous, by the way. They had wonderful sailboats on them.
One sat in front of Hitchcock for years.
First off, Chris, I just wanted to say that you told that story to the people at the blood department at the hospital, and they mention it every single time I come in. So I'm glad to hear it. It is real, because I was a little worried about if it was true or not. They told me guy came in and told them that about Scav, and they just kept telling it over and over. So I'm glad there's confirmation about that cop.
Get an extra pint that way.
My question is, were there any item completions that, like, even for a moment, made you regret everything?
The coffin. Yeah, we had a coffin on there, and people went and they went to the airport, and apparently there's transport coffins that are cardboard that they use just cheaply to get the body to where it needs to be. And all of these came in, and they smelled of embalming fluid or whatever it was, and it was just really, that was the one where I was like, no, why did we put that? That was not a good idea. The coffin.
That was not on my page. I watched and I regretted the shove a whole orange in your mouth. I mean, the most successful people kind of juiced it on the way in, but it was not pretty.
But talent, really talent.
Yeah. Remarkable, but disturbing.
All right, the one I regret probably, I don't know, maybe I don't regret it. Let's just say I paid a price for it, and that was the communion wafer. There was one where it was non-consecrated, it was very clear, but it turns out somebody hadn't played by the rules. And I got called by the cardinal, and I had to go in for specialty training for several visits.
I did not know that.
You did not know that? No.
I mean, it's hard to tell the difference whether it's consecrated. If you're just a,
Well,
like a
they-
layperson, it's hard to tell the difference.
Well, apparently when the priest comes in and says, "Who is that guy who ran out of the church
I mean,
after taking the host?"
And I was going through the trash that night. I mean, I was trying to find any of the wafers so that one of us could eat. I would have to eat it or something. It was terrible. Couldn't find one anywhere.
I mean, we thought you'd just knock on a rectory door and go, "Could I have a communion wafer that you haven't?" Yeah,
One point.
There were teens who had just bought a whole package and they were just snacking on them. They weren't consecrated. It was fine. It was crackers.
we didn't want to start something with. Oh.
I'm sure there's a file on me in the
Vatican, there's cardinals that are waiting for us. Sorry.
It's still a good item.
That's an A+ item. I don't care who you are.
Nolan, do you have one?
Yeah, just in general, I have an overactive gag reflex, so anything that involved extreme eating was something I regretted.
Yeah, so obviously you all graduated and yet Scav Hunt continued. How did you choose your first successors, if indeed choice played a role in it?
Well, Chris, I don't know if you remember this, but when you first approached me, you were like, "You've got to get people your year because I want this to live on, and I've only got 2 years left, so I want freshmen." So you sort of started that with the "I want the freshmen" in mind. And oh, by the way, they better not be from your house. You better go outside. And the only people I knew outside my house were these guys. So it was like, okay. And then I think that from there, it really was just kind of beginning to bring in the people that were really passionate about it. So my future husband did the road trip for the first 2 years and loved it and just was crazy passionate about it. And then really got into like, okay, got to improve your scoring. And so he kind of came over. And then from there, we found other people that were just crazy passionate and just kind of kept bringing it along. But if you had have asked me when I graduated, if I thought that it was going to be around, close to 40 years later, I would have said no.
But they selected it themselves.
Yeah, there was a lot of self-selection and it was it was very organic. We didn't have an application process. It was, people would they come up and ask us about it. And we did our third year, we did make an effort to find people who were younger than we were, who were like first or second years, so that we would be able to pass on whatever tiny bit of knowledge we had accumulated in that very brief period of time about how to run this thing.
It was the scars, yes.
But yeah, so I don't think I would say that at least I was surprised that it survived when we graduated. I was surprised and delighted that it survived after we graduated. And then that it continued to evolve after that.
I mean, we were never on the other side of it, right?
Mhm.
We were always, on one side of the equation. And then when people would come up to us and say, that was a blast, but what would be even more fun is being involved in the sadism. And and uniformly they made convincing cases. I mean, right? To Diane's point, it was organic. I just remember people showing up at the table and having great ideas, like, all right, you're in. There was no selection procedure other than you figure out where our meeting is and you have
and you show up and you are able to keep a secret.
Yeah. Obviously, once you cross the line,
you could never go back.
It was omerta the rest of the way. But we never had any problem with that I recall.
No.
We never had any leakage. So yeah.
Never thought of it leakage.
It was a bit biological, wasn't it?
Hey, Kat.
This question is actually on behalf of someone who is currently busy helping set up a headquarters tonight for the graduate and alumni team. Are you all familiar with the movie E.T., the extraterrestrial? Is E.T.
That was when we were kids.
Yes.
I understand it's like It's like
Yeah.
Casablanca to you.
So ET, is he wet or dry?
Oh. He's totally slimy.
What, Nolan, what'd you say?
I said he's totally slimy. He's wet.
Dry.
I vote dry.
I thought he was supposed to be wet, but got dry, and that was the problem.
This has to do with the headquarters tonight?
I just wanted
Those-
to know.
One of those imponderable as a hot dog, a sandwich type questions. Okay. That's,
Fair
It's
enough.
all right. He started off with me, 40 years ago with who invented the match. So you never know.
so was there 1 year that there was we tried like a fall version that was like a drive around town?
Yes, that was the
Wasn't a
beginning of
scavenger.
my second year, our second
It
year.
wasn't the scavenger hunt, but it was
The
like,
treasure hunt, yeah.
Is it
Right,
treasure?
treasure.
Yeah.
wow, that was
You know what?
innovative.
You had to go someplace to get clues. He went to the next place to get more clues, and it was a sequential.
I wasn't on the,
Getting
I
amongst
actually
them.
did that. I wasn't on the planning for that
Yeah.
because I was taking organic
fun.
chemistry and I
Didn't
couldn't
lie.
plan
Didn't-
anything.
The only thing I remember that is that is that one of the clues was snot farming,
Mhm.
which was a anagram for Frango mince, which you could only get at Marshall Field.
Right.
Right, yes. And my husband is still annoyed at me because I figured out that it was Marshall Fields because snot is green. And so is Marshall and so is Marshall, and Marshall Fields color was green and fields are green. And so clearly we were supposed to go to Marshall Fields. And I never figured out the anagram. I just we went to Marshall Fields and I wandered around until I found someone with a clipboard, and then I answered their question and I got the next thing. And he's apparently it was his question. So he's just morally appalled that I got about the way I got that.
So the treasure hunt is not canon, but whenever I think of Chris Straus, I think of snot farming.
I'm honored.
Not sure if we have any other questions. Before we go, we want to thank you with a special gift from Special Collections for all of your hard work over the years. It's a full set
Oh my
of, it's a full set of the lists. It is complete until midnight and then it's incomplete.
Oh, it's heavy.
It's very heavy. It's over 600 pages. Nolan, yours is in the mail and
Okay, great.
you'll get
Thank
it
you.
shortly. It'll feel like a brick.
I'll look forward to it.
First item I turn to, an anti-gravity cat. 2 points. That is
Thank you.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
An exhibit is open. It runs until August 9th. And tonight open for another half hour or so. So feel free to check it out and it have some Red Bull coleslaw for the road and enjoy the
You
hunt
can go
this
and
week.
see all of our incredibly.
Thank you so much, Nolan.
Great, thank you. I'll see everyone soon, hopefully.
They're taking pictures now.
Okay.
You'll be in the pictures too.
Send me the placard. I can put that to good use.
Yes, I know, absolutely. Across the 61st Street or 62nd.
Bye.
Hi.
Totally remember you. Didn't have me go by.
No, it's, no.
Everything likes a meal. For the like. But it's all like fries and crisps, so we're all.
They all drink and they drink Malort, so be ready.
It's, but it's got a cynical anti-capitalist, right?
Okay.